Life.
All right, will everybody grab their coffee and find a seat? We're about ready to pick it up. Remember, the camera is off over there.
Oh, all right.
So, all right. Welcome. This is the second session. We've been promised hope today, so I'm looking forward to that on this dreary day. So, Dr. Novosky.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you. Thanks for coming. I understand we have people in the choir, many of whom were here last week, and now they're practicing. So that's fine. I was really happy to see all of you, and I still am. So you're hanging in there with me. Glad to do that. Glad you are. Okay. Oh, you can't hear me? Is what? We don't have a micro. I'll use my teacher voice. I'll use my teacher voice.
It's a microphone, but it's hooked up in the. So mute that classroom voice.
Okay. So Jonathan, how is this going to advance?
Just click the slideshow.
So what I talked about then was defining authoritarianism, what it is. It's not exactly dictatorship. It's not exactly monarchy. It can be a whole lot of different things. And I like to use that word because it subsumes all of these things and it gives us, I think it gives us more tools, right? And more ways to divide up non-democratic types of governments. So one thing I wanted to emphasize that I didn't last week is that authoritarians cannot rule by force alone, right? One of the things about dictators is that generally speaking, they control the means, all the means of the use of force, right? So guns and all the military equipment is very carefully controlled by the state so that the leader can, deploy it however they want. But this doesn't work forever because people they don't want to be ruled by force and fear. So there's always some kind of other legitimacy, meaning when I was talking about legitimacy last week, what I mean is people agree that whoever it is in power has the right, the legitimate right to rule over them, to make decisions for them, right? Okay, so in a democracy, we elect our leaders. And so through their being elected to that position, they have legitimate authority. We have ceded them the right to make decisions for us. Does that make sense? Right, and if we don't like them, we vote them out. This is why voting is so important, because it holds them accountable. So I'm going to have some more things to say about that. So authoritarians can't rule by force alone. And this now is why electoral autocracies are the most common, meaning that the dictator, or whoever it is, the leader, the autocrat, gets elected. But it's not necessarily in free and fair elections. They manipulate them so that they win. And I'll talk about this later too, but at least they can say, oh, I have the people's mandate. They voted for me. Putin won last time with 80%. That just makes everybody laugh. I mean, even in Russia, they laugh. Okay. So also some other legitimacy that they rest on, helps when their economies aren't healthy. So one thing that's happening, for example, in Russia is that their economy has been totally put on a war footing. There's sanctions in place against them. They've been able to get around a lot of that. They're still selling their oil to China and to India. However, consumers are noticing there are starting to be shortages, especially of gasoline. The Ukrainians have bombed a lot of the oil refineries that produce gasoline in Russia. So people are lining up for, gas for their cars, and they're noticing things are not going as great. And there's starting to be some shortages, even in Moscow, right? St. Petersburg. So it's not healthy. And, many of them well, I could go off into Russia. I'm sorry. I won't. Right. If you have questions, I'll try to leave some time at the end and you can ask me some questions. Okay, another thing that I wanted to emphasize from last week that I was trying to get at when I was talking about international broadcasting and the radios is that there are always cracks in any system. No matter how horrific in 1984-ish it is. You know, we're not to 1984 yet, where they're trying to erase people's concepts. They're erasing the concepts through which people think. Okay, so for us, they're not quite doing that yet. And in Russia, they haven't been able to do that. But if you think about it, you know, if you're exposed to the information in a certain media bubble, you're going to hear some words and ideas more than others. So that is definitely happening, right? But for what I know for sure that on Fox News, they are not showing the No Kings rallies with the correct audio. And they're talking about them as if, you know, these are terrorists and left-wing thugs. And, you know, I'd like to see a left-wing thug for a change. Okay. So there's always room for dissent. There's always a hunger for truth among people. They know when they're being lied to. If you read 1984, Winston knows exactly that he is being lied to. I mean, he works in the ministry that is editing all of the history books and all of the publications and changing the history. And then he puts it down a memory hole, right? We're not there yet. Okay, we're not there yet. But they're always crass. People don't stay placid forever. Sometimes it's really hard, and sometimes it takes a long time. You know, it took the Soviet Union 70 years to come out of communism, but they did. They did. Okay, and also what I wanted to say too is remember that this is happening not only in the United States, but all over the world, right? All, you know, many countries where it wouldn't really surprise us, and other countries where it does, right? Look, for example, at the rise of the far-right party in Germany. If that doesn't scare you, technically, the Constitution says that a party that espouses Nazi views is illegal. So they're very careful about what they say, but you bet they're far right, right? And they now have a plurality, meaning they have the most seats in the German Bundestag. Or maybe it's the second largest, but it's a lot, and they keep gaining. Germany, you'd think I could rant about that. Didn't want to rant so much today, and I'm not going to swear as much either. If my mother were here, she'd be totally appalled, right? So I have to watch it. Okay. Right. So what I want to talk about today is democratic backsliding. And what this means is the gradual erosion of norms, of rights, of institutions, of democracy. And this map is old, it's from 2020, but the red color is bad. That means they're having significant democratic backsliding. And the blue is good, they're democratizing. Woo. So look, I mean, it's crazy. And this is 2020. So if we fast forward to where we are now, I think we'd look like Brazil. So it's still happening. I promised you hope, I will give you some. Okay, yes. So backsliding is often perpetrated by elected leaders who use legal and seemingly legitimate methods to accumulate power. Did you guys know that Putin is a lawyer? He was in law school when I was studying Russian at Leningrad State University. I could have passed him. So if I think they have about, I don't know, 40,000 or 45,000 students, and the law school was on Vasilevsky Island, which is a different place than where we were. Anyway, so he's only 2 years older than I am. Creeps me out. Okay, so he's a lawyer, and so he always says, I'm doing everything according to the law. Well, he is, but what they do, he controls the law. He controls the legislature. He controls the courts, when they're making political decisions, the courts in Russia actually work pretty well if it's just civil and it doesn't have anything to do with politics. They're working better. There's a legal profession. The judges are more professional, right? But if it has to do anything with politics, then that's decided, that's already, it's not objective. Okay. So what happens is that the checks and balances in a democracy erode. And it's more insidious and often more invisible. So the people kind of don't really realize what's happening. This happened in Turkey under Erdogan, slowly. His party had a majority because he appealed to the mass of Muslim voters out in the rural areas, right? And so he could change the law through the Congress. This happened also in Hungary. Okay, so we don't really get violent coups anymore, right? Those are more rare. What we get is this slow erosion of the institutions of democracy or anything that checked the leader. Okay, so this has been happening in established democracies, in newer democracies, and also in places where they had been making progress toward democracy, such as Hungary and Poland. Poland, though, recently had an election where they elected the prime minister. They have a dual system, so they have a president and they have a prime minister. The prime minister is from the old nasty party that was in power for a while and was doing away with civil liberties. The president they re-elected, and he's from the pro-Europe, pro-democracy, let's fix the courts. So Poland is having this big struggle, but they're doing pretty well because of their president. Okay, boy, I'm on slide 2. A lot to do here. Okay, so characteristics of backsliding, you have executive aggrandizement. So this occurs when the executive expands its power at the expense of other government branches through legal institutional changes. So we've seen some of that here. Okay, so there's more here. I'm going to make it possible for you to get these slides. I didn't want to, it's being recording. I didn't really want them out there, but it's fine. I mean, part of the hope is that I'm okay still. They're not going to come and arrest me. They're just going to arrest a whole bunch of people before they arrest me. So, okay, right. What's that? Oh boy, thank you. Okay, I'll come and take refuge in the church. Yes, right. So the second thing would be electoral manipulation. Here I have Maduro. He was elected again, re-elected in 2024 with 80% of the vote. 80% of the vote, authoritarians like this. Oh, if it's 80% of this is Putin. This is, who knows next time, Trump. No, don't say that. They like that. So it means changing the electoral rules to favor the ruling party and disadvantage opponents, gerrymandering and malapportionment. Oh, we've been seeing that. Voter suppression, new voter ID laws, reductions in polling facilities, restrictive registration deadlines, blocking access. Personally, this is the thing I'm most worried about, right? For our country is electoral manipulation. But the states are responsible for elections. So here's where we can be activist, right? Oregon, I don't think we have much to worry about unless for some reason they stop us from mail voting, which he would like to do. Trump would like to do that. But I don't think we'll do it, at least not in the next few elections. So, but in other states, if you have friends and relatives in other states that are a little bit sketch in terms of voting and voting access, get them to get out there and do something about it. Okay. Yeah, so what happens then is it undermines confidence in elections through spreading baseless conspiracy theories about voter fraud, attacking legitimacy of electoral outcomes. This is very familiar to us now, right? But it didn't used to be, and it is in these other democratic backsliding places. The integrity of the elections is questioned. So why even bother to vote? Well, this is what they want, right? They could turn out their supporters, and other people who think, oh, that's not going to make any difference, they sit home. So that's another thing we can do is voter drives. Okay, yeah. Third thing, suppression of the opposition, right? A shrinking space for public discourse, targeting opponents, restricting civil society, limiting assembly and protest. Okay, so these things are not happening quite so fiercely yet. We're still okay, except for using nationalism to demonize minorities. That's happening. Employing nationalistic rhetoric to frame minority groups as threats and enemies of the state. We've definitely, and the press is an enemy of the state, right? I mean, he said, oh. Okay, so suppression of opposition, we got a ways to go there. Don't worry, I'm getting more, I'm gonna get to the hope part. This is another example, is now Mexico under, well, okay, now it's his kind of hand-chosen successor who was voted in. What is her name? Sheinbaum. Thank you, yes, Sheinbaum. Yeah. So there was this huge social movement in Mexico by women. Number one, they were pro abortion rights in Mexico, in the cities, and they were able to get that through the courts and through voting. But what they're protesting about here is this kind of violence against women that comes kind of from the culture that men can get away with it with impunity. You know, the incidences of domestic violence, of forcible, you know, rape, of all sorts of things against women. These young women are just mad about it. And this was in 2019. I had students that wrote papers about this, and they were out there protesting, but, you know, AMLO sent out the military to stop that. This is ironic, yeah? Okay. There's more info here that you'll be able to see if you want to go through this slide yourself. I don't have enough time, I don't think, to do all this. Okay, erosion of civil liberties and a free press, right? Democratic backsliding depends on controlling information and limiting dissent. You know, so this is kind of what we see outside the ICE building here. And we see that when troops were sent into Los Angeles and troops being sent into Chicago. Right, so curtailing press freedom, silencing critical media outlets through fines, lawsuits, intimidation. We've seen this happening. Spreading misinformation, state-affiliated or partisan media to spread disinformation, undermine faith in objective facts. Okay, this sounds so familiar to us, but this is true of all democratic backsliding societies, right? We have this in common with people around the world who are going through this. We could actually get into an international movement. Okay. Then weakening the rule of law, disregarding constitutional principles and court orders that limit executive power. So we see this struggle happening too. Right. I know, I keep promising hope. Right, so factors contributing to backsliding. So intense polarization, right? A deeply divided electorate and political elite, often fueled by misinformation, fosters an us and them mentality that makes compromise difficult. This has been happening in our politics since at least 1994 with Newt Gingrich. And you could argue even before that. You guys remember, you're old enough to remember the contract with America. This was the take no prisoners approach. We don't compromise with the Democrats, right? They can pound sand. Okay, populist leaders, charismatic populists or personalist, where everything sort of devolves to them, often gain power by challenging the legitimacy of established political institutions and norms. So we've seen so much norm breaking. And we realize now how much our system depends on norms. Like one thing, a norm is how you should behave, and it's routinized behavior around a certain value. So we had the norm for a long time of institutional forbearance, like meaning institution and the law would allow more than maybe what people are doing, but people don't do it. So what this means is that with this polarization in Congress, that norm went out the window. They went to the full in terms of what the institution would allow. Look at, what's his name? Mr. Turtle, Senate leader, former, thank you, who wouldn't allow Obama a Supreme Court appointment, but then allowed 3 for Trump, right? That's an example of this. No more institutional forbearance. We can do it, so we will. And that's a norm. It's really too bad. Right. So then high economic equality, persistent economic inequality, citizen discontent can create fertile ground for authoritarian leaders who promise change. Well, there's all these promises. Oh yeah, we're going to stop inflation. We're going to add to the treasury by all the tariffs that are going to be paid by these other countries. No, we pay them. I mean, our businesses and our consumers pay them. China doesn't pay this. But people believe the disinformation, right? And then external influence. Foreign powers may interfere with the country's elections or spread disinformation to exacerbate instability and undermine democratic processes. So before the Russians with their bots and troll farms and whatever in 2016 did it to the United States, they did it in European elections as test cases in the previous 10 years. And so they got good at it. And so they did it to us. And I'm not saying they were necessarily pro-Trump. They were just putting out all kinds of crap that people believed. Notice I didn't swear. Right. Okay, so yeah, so we have our current institutions, right? We definitely see the lying down and dying of Congress, right? They're not doing anything. What can we do if they're not doing anything? Not a damn thing. I mean, they're supposed to be legislating. They're supposed to be a check on power. Nothing. Okay, court packing with politically vetted judges, right? So the Republicans had a plan about this, or at least Republican adjacent, maybe Heritage Foundation people, had this idea that, the courts are too liberal. So we're going to start putting in judges that are more conservative. And this was a long-term project now coming to fruition. Right. And then attacks on federalism or the constitutional division of powers. The Congress enumerates the powers of the federal government, the powers of the states. And then there's some that are jointly shared. Well, there's some things like, federalizing troops and sending into the states where the governors don't want them. I mean, this is happening. This is happening. So this is nasty. The erosion, oops, I got a D in there. Sorry, I was working on this late last night, believe it or not. Right. And then, oh my God, the executive. So executive overreach of the Trump administration. There's a whole bunch of things here that you all know about, and I will not repeat. All right. In the past, just about any one of these things would have triggered an impeachment of the president for overreach of, abuse of power. And so this is I think one of their, what should I say, strategies is flooding the zone, meaning there's so much. People are bamboozled. What do we do? How do we even understand what's going on? How are these things related or not related? And where are the points that we can put pressure? And people look at this and think, and it's outrageous. And I think it's easy to become demobilized because we're so depressed. I mean, I'm depressed. I study this stuff and I think, I never thought in my lifetime I would see this. I'm an old Cold Warrior, for Pete's sake. How could this be? How could this be? I mean, the United States is not perfect, but it had this image and truth in some ways about being this beacon for democracy or beacon for other people to have hope, beacon of opportunity, beacon of freedom. And I think we all still believe those things. This is what we value about this society, but all of them seem to be under assault. And I think it's easy to get really dismayed about this. So are we doomed to authoritarian rule? All this looks like we're going that way. And it's true, we are, but we are not there yet. And we still have a bunch of things that we could do and that we need to do if we want to save it. I think it was Franklin, who said, so he was asked, what's the best form of government? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it. Meaning that the people have to constantly renew their institutions and their leaders to make sure they're going along with the original vision of what this country is. Right. So obviously, we have this charismatic leader whose authority derives from his ability to convince people that he represents their views and can solve their problems. Our three main branches have been captured, the leader and his minions. So look at the Supreme Court. Bloody outrageous. What? Okay, so we need a long-term strategy to take back the court. That's going to take a while, right? It took the other side 50 years, right? It will probably take us that, but don't get dismayed because it's possible. Okay, the leader and his underlings flaunt the US Constitution, increasing the Bill of Rights. The leader has enabled a massive ripoff of the American people with the tax codes and enhance the redistribution of wealth upward, and there's no accountability and no repercussions. For these people who are making bank. Can I just say cryptocurrency? I mean, geez. Okay. And then so many factors have led to this historical moment in the US over the course of, I'd say, at least 60 years. It's kind of crept up. People aren't noticing. About 20 years ago, political scientists are saying, oh, there's democratic backsliding. And it's happening all over the world. Oh, it's happening in our country. What? What? So people started studying democratic backsliding. My last few years of teaching, I taught courses now. Instead of democratization, which I taught in the past, I taught democratic backsliding. And the students, they had no, I'm looking for Avery. They had no reference, not saying this about you because you're a history major, they don't teach history. They don't teach geography. They don't teach the Cold War. I mean, unless you're in some kind of really nice private school, but I think the public school teachers try. I think they're very constrained with what they can do. Okay, so why should we have hope that our democracy can be saved? Having said all that and got us all depressed again, how can we do? So one of my heroes is Anne Applebaum. And I wanted to play some videos, but we can't do it technically. But I've given you the URL. She's on YouTube. It's free. She's wonderful. She's my hero. She has written, and all the people that are heroes of mine practically are historians of the countries that I study. Soviet Union, Russia, Eastern Europe, Ukraine, right? She's one of them. And her most recent book, I think, is this one, Autocracy, Inc., where she points out how when you have these democratic backsliding autocracies, that is, led by a single person or by an oligarchy, they're always completely mixed up with the corruption in the economy, right? Always. So this is a characteristic of it, and it's in part what's happening to us. I think this book is super enlightening. I recommend it. Okay, so I love her. This is from yesterday. She was on YouTube, and she's saying, we still live in one of the freest countries on the planet. Hope we still live in one of the freest countries on the planet. We live in a rich society. We have the tools to express ourselves. We're not constrained by dictatorship. Not yet, and we have a ways to go before we are. If we are lawyers, we work on lawsuits. If we are doctors, we work on public health communication. If we're teachers, we teach students to understand all of American history, the bad and the good, the realities of American history. It doesn't make America any less great. We recognize our flaws and we try to do something about it. We have many opportunities and possibilities to engage with politics or with public life or with the culture more broadly. I don't want people to think that we are now in a dictatorship, that we have to stay home because it's too dangerous. We're too fearful. There's nothing we can do. I have spent time in real dictatorships and we are not there yet. And this is exactly the thing I was going to say. I've lived in real dictatorships. I lived in Russia overall my whole thing for about a year and a half at different times from 1975 up. Well, I couldn't go in the 80s because I worked for the radios. But then in the 90s, in the 2000s, last time I was there, unfortunately, was 2011, when there was a huge change when Putin saw the Arab Spring and the Gaddafi being killed. That apparently haunts Putin. And so he started cracking down then on dissent. So anyway, that's the last time I was there. But we're not there yet. And I often think, if I could like do a Star Trek thing and beam a whole bunch of MAGA people to Russia, we'll live there for a year, see what they think about it. Oh, I bet no, they wouldn't like it. They don't have freedom. They really don't. Okay. She says we could end up there in a dictatorship, but we don't have to. So there's some info on here. This is the short where she says this that I've given you the URL for. She divides her time between Poland and the US. Poland is this history now, modern history of democratic backsliding. She's married to, his name is Radoslaw Sikorski. Does that name ring a bell for anybody? Sikorsky helicopters. I mean, I think he's related. He's the current defense minister, and he is awesome. So she's married to him. So she has all this insight into what's going on in Poland and, front row seat, and then all this insight into what's going on in the United States. She tours here a lot. Totally recommend her books. She's on YouTube a lot saying, we can't be afraid. Do something. She said part of the strategy of dictatorship or would-be dictators is to make people not care, right? It's nihilism, right? Even if we care, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Nihilistic. That's what they want to create, that you don't care, that it's inevitable, nothing you can do. I think we need to prove dictators wrong because we do care, especially in this country. Okay. Also, we still have our rights and the lower courts, our state and local governments. We have free and independent press outlets. Our big media, what they call, I think, heritage media, they're, controlled by giant corporations and things, but we still have independent media. There are so many people out there doing these individual podcasts who are fabulous. And you can just sort of go to your Apple podcast or wherever you get podcasts, or maybe you don't listen to podcasts, but you should. They're great. You can find all kinds of people who have all kinds of great ideas that don't come from the mainstream media, right? Or the heritage media. We have the right to assemble peacefully and publicly. Look at all these No Kings rallies last week. 7 million people out on the streets. This is not nothing. It's trying, the other side's trying to portray it as, it's a bunch of paid protesters. It's a bunch of clowns. It's a bunch of old hippies, right? First they were saying it's leftist thugs and Antifa. Now they're saying it's a bunch of old hippies. They're just trying to discredit what's going on. And I think it scares the crap out of Trump. If he really sees how many people, if you see the number of people that were on the streets in Chicago or New York or LA or even Portland, and 2,600 protests, even in Boise. Even in places where you would not expect it, places where they voted for Trump, they have No Kings rallies. Okay, we have the right to free speech. We have the right to protest. We can write to our officials. We can speak out. We can join groups. We have judges who are unafraid to stay executive orders. And they might be overruled, but there's all these wonderful opinions out there about how what is happening is unlawful. It's illegal, it's unlawful, it's against the Constitution. So that's out there in the public domain. Right. We also have police and National Guards who are doing their jobs and not aiding ICE. Depends on the state. I don't know if you saw the commandant of the Oregon National Guard who was interviewed and said, well, I think our job is to protect Oregonians. So we'll protect the protesters. I thought, you go. It's fabulous. Right. We have state governors who object to federal overreach of executive orders. You know, Pritzker of Illinois and Newsom, obviously, of California, who just trolls Trump all the time. But there are a whole bunch of others in blue states who are, they're appalled. And I think there's some red state governors too, who are appalled at what's happening at this sort of power grab and abrogation of rights, you know, just on a whim. Right. I also, this is my opinion, but I think there's good polling data to support the commitment of the majority of Americans to the rule of law. You know, we are a society of lawyers. I don't know, there's a kind of a book that's gotten a lot of splash in the last maybe 6 months or so, where it talks about how the Chinese are engineers and they can build anything in a really short amount of time, and they don't care what the consequences are. In the United States, how long does it take us to build like a high-speed railway or a highway, or for Pete's sake, the second part of the Newburgh bypass? I mean, it's taken my whole time since I lived in McMinnville, which is 32 years now. But anyway, but we have a society of lawyers, a lot of lawyers, a lot of people who represent, you know, they do it for money and represent the corporations and whatever, but not all corporations are bad. And also we have a lot of lawyers with the ACLU and other people who are bringing lawsuits, attorneys general, various states bringing lawsuits. Okay, so we do have a commitment to the rule of law. What's happening notwithstanding. Okay, and I think that's a strength, and I think that that's hopeful. You know, we have had our democracy, more or less, representative democracy. We've had periods of time, like in the Civil War and post-Civil War periods, where it was dicey, like now. But at the same time, we have always had the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And we're educated into those things. We have a democratic society. I mean, those things are under threat because they did away with civics education. I think we should put it back. So I think we have that going for us. We're the longest existing established representative democracy, republic. We have a lot of people who don't agree with what's going on. I'd say it's close to 70%. I'm almost done. Let's see. Whoop. Yeah, we cannot be passive. What can be done? A few ideas. That's a No Kings rally right there. I think I forget where I got it from, but you just put in Google No Kings rallies, images, and you get tons from all over all these different cities. Okay, so who I find useful or inspiring in analyzing the situation, suggesting what steps to take. So one exception to the Russia-Ukraine focus is Heather Cox Richardson. If you don't listen to her, you really should. She's got a YouTube channel. She does a Substack called Letters from an American. And those are free. Substack is free. I mean, you can subscribe, but you get the main stuff free. She's incredible. She's so clear. And she knows her history. She does these historical analogies, and she takes questions from her audiences, and they raise all these current political issues and questions. And she's great. And she always leaves with something positive and hopeful at the end. No, she's one of the people that's saying this is not inevitable. We can stop it. With a lot of authority. And she interviews all kinds of interesting people. So Also, Timothy Snyder, who's at the University of Toronto now, he was at at Yale. He has written these excellent books. He's written many books, but this one on tyranny, it's this tiny little book that has 20 lessons from the 20th century. The first lesson of which is don't obey in advance. Don't lie down and die until you have to, right? Let's see. And I never thought that I would be touting something by Bill Kristol. If we all remember who that is, for Pete's sake. He's one of these neocons that supported going into Iraq, for Pete's sake. But he's now with the Bulwark because he's a never Trumper. And I listen to the Bulwark or find stuff on there just because it's from more traditional conservatives, not the crazy conservatives we have now on the right, but the traditional ones who actually have the same sorts of values that all Americans do, but they just believe in slower change. How do you square that with what's going on now? You can't. Okay, but they're good, the Bulwark, and Bill Kristol has his own podcast, and he's interviewing Timothy Snyder, and they had this incredible conversation, and I forget when it was, it's not too long ago, and I was going to play a little bit of it, but I can't, for technical reasons. Poor Avery, I'm sorry. Okay, and then so Heather Cox Richardson did an interview with Senator Andy Kim just in the last few days, like October 22nd. He's from the state of New Jersey. And he talks about how he became a senator, which was just kind of, just sort of serendipitous in a way. And he didn't ever think. It happened to him relatively quickly. He had a career with the State Department before he was a congressman, and then for just like I think a term, and then a senator. And he's good here. What he says is that most of this interview is about corruption in the government, but also in general in the economy. But what he says toward the end of the interview is that parties, as we have known them, have essentially collapsed, meaning they don't stand for what they used to, or in the case of the Republicans, but in the case of the Democrats, they're feckless, right? They're relying on old laws and old norms and ways of behaving that don't work anymore. I mean, in politics, in the Congress, they don't work anymore. And it's not even about policy anymore, although many of us are really worried about policy. What about inflation? What about the Fed? What about healthcare? We are worried about that. You can't win elections really on those things anymore. It's more about identity, especially on the right. What does it mean to be an American? What do we support? Well, we support getting rid of brown people, right? That motivates them. I had a conversation with someone I went to high school with not that long ago, and I really haven't kept in touch with her, but I had lunch with her, and she is a very devout Christian, evangelical Christian. And she said, well, I support what they're doing with the immigrants. And I support what they're doing to the immigrants. We can't have all these people coming here. They're illegal aliens. I felt like saying, what would Jesus say about that? But I didn't, because I should have, right? Because, geez. Okay, right, so I'll open it for questions. Let me see if I had anything else. Oh yeah, so just to conclude, it took a while for the conditions that now exist to be created. And it's going to take a while to change those conditions so that something else can emerge. Maybe we'll have a new party system. Maybe we'll have proportional representation and not a two-party system. I think that would be fabulous. Right, it's going to take decades to change the conditions, but we still have our freedoms, our rights, tools that we can use, and strength in numbers. It's clear the majority of Americans do not, by a pretty large margin now, like 65% of people to 75% of people do not support what Trump is doing. or these policies that are happening, policies, initiatives by the powers that be. The majority of Americans subscribe to the values of freedom, pluralism, truth, and rule of law. And we don't have to accept what's occurring. We don't have to give in to fear. This is why I'm making these recordings available. Intimidation or false narratives about facts, what the American people want. When all this stuff is claimed to be, oh, the American people want this, with no evidence whatsoever. Give us the evidence. Show us what the American people want. They don't want this. Right, right. Who has power and who's weak? Well, we have a lot of power. The Constitution vests power into the people. We, the people of the United States. And we should not give up. That's it. Thank you. Feel hopeful? Yes.
Say is the largest contributing factor to what's happening? Would you say it's the economy, just smarting people? Would you say that it's the foreign media influence, controlling what you think? If you had to put in maybe top 2 or 3, what do you think is the largest contributing factor?
Okay. So I see really the main underlying factor is the inequality of wealth. We have in the United States that's very severe, and actually globally too. I think this is causing a lot of issues, a lot of democratic backsliding, because what's been happening here, this redistribution of wealth upward, is happening other places too. Even if they claim they're socialist, right? If they're an authoritarian dictator and they claim to be socialists, that's still happening, where the institutions are rigged and the economy is rigged to extort and extract from the people, from the laborers, from the workers, and give it to the billionaires. This is happening all over the world. The 0.01% of our country, of our wealthy people, I think I said last week, they own more wealth than the bottom whole 50% of the United States population. That's gross. No wonder. I don't know how many of you are feeling squeezed, but tax cuts, tax cuts for the wealthy. I tell you, I'm paying the same tax rate as I was before these tax cuts. And it's a giant ripoff and a giant con. So in order to deflect attention from that, and anytime you say class warfare, right? It's the rich against the poor, the right wing starts foaming at the mouth, right? So you can't really put it in class terms. But I think to deflect what's really happening, they say, oh, the immigrants are taking your jobs. Oh, it's unfair because white people can't get into Harvard. Oh, it's, they blame whatever, the culture, right? It's gay people. It's rotting our culture. It's wrecking our manhood. I mean, this is the kind of crap they say. Oh, it's QAnon, it's a conspiracy. Oh, it's George Soros. Oh, for God's sake. I mean, so sorry, I'm ranting, but they're trying to deflect away from the main problem, which is this wealth inequality. Bernie, I love Bernie. You just kind of don't want to listen to him, but he's totally right. So listen to Bernie Sanders. What he's saying about wealth inequality and what needs to happen. Yes.
3 kids were VAs.
Yeah.
And it was one of the Bush elections, and they said, it really doesn't matter who's president.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it came right out of those schools saying, we'll run the economics, just, go to politics and we'll be just fine. And I also wonder how Obama's entrance into this discussion is going to change things.
Okay. Yeah. So I think this is really interesting because I think I think Obama is the result of the kind of failure of George W. Bush around the wars that were started under him, and also the economic crash. So I think Obama got a boost from that, and he's saying hope and change, and he was completely charismatic himself. So a lot of people, yeah, hope and change. But what did that mean? He got elected. Oh my God, he's a Black man. He wasn't born in the United States. Oh, he's doing the bidding, the Kenyans. No. So I think in a way he didn't have a chance. And Obama, both to his credit and to his detriment, is a nerd. I mean, he's a constitutional lawyer. And I think he was very, very cautious. And he also had zero foreign policy experience. So, whatever excuse it was to stop Obama, I think mainly because it was racism, that's what they did. So, and he was trying to do stuff about healthcare, and it was the Republican plan. The ACA was a Republican plan. It was put into Massachusetts by Mitt Romney, and it worked great. And a lot of people got health insurance under that. And the Republicans have done nothing but to try to wreck it, including now. They still want to that's why the government shut down, right? So, rant rave. Also, watch out for economists. I'm sorry, but they think they're right. And the only economist that I sort of think is right, although he's a little extreme, is Robert Reich. He's fabulous. Okay. So the two things, you said two things. So one is, let me think of another thing. I guess that was two things, right? Blaming the wealth inequality on everything else but the wealth inequality, right? And the people who benefit from it. Yeah.
Vietnam, point of article. You're associated with students of info. This is kind of two question for Avery. What would you assess the current younger college generation, particularly their sense of engagement about this issue? So I'd like to hear from both. What do you think, Avery?
Yeah.
How's the people on campus?
No pressure.
I mean, I think like everything, it's a mixed bag, it's complicated. I think there definitely are some people who are kind of falling into that nihilism and despair and kind of wanting to tune things out. But obviously there are also people, like our college students, who are going down to the ice building every night. Like there are people who are like taking action and like trying to do things. Like I'm part of a group of people trying to start a student workers union on the campus right now. So like there are people trying to do things and make change.
Is there a significant conservative element as well, would you say?
Not at my university.
Which is PSU.
PSU, yeah, not at Portland State, but
What would you say as far as Linfield?
Well, Linfield's a whole kettle of fish, different, just because, PSU is an urban campus and they've got much more diverse in all ways population. They have actually adult students and all sorts of different people here on different programs. So Linfield, one thing that's happened to it is about a third, I'd say, or maybe 35%, you've been to the board meeting, you probably know better than I do, of our student body now are people of color, mostly Latinos. And they kind of have their own student organizations now, and it's good. 10, 12 years ago, we didn't have that. And lately, some of our, award-winning students are Latino students. And I think and a lot of them are from McMinnville. They come from McMinnville High School. But, they come kind of from a culture that's saying, you got to get a job. You got to get through this, super expensive, and get a job. So not only the Latinos are like that, a lot of the students are like, getting a master's in business and getting a job. And it's like, So the liberal arts aspect of it, it was already starting to, liberal arts means just being broadly educated, not liberal. And our languages are gone. All we have left is Spanish. Japanese is gone now. German is gone. French is going. I just think this is horrific that there's been this kind of pulling in, it goes along. It's the zeitgeist. It's what Trump says. It's America first. It's, put your nose to the grindstone, here, we don't care about anybody else. We care about our jobs, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm wondering, kind of getting at some options. I'm kind of interested in specifics as to who's really driving this. I mean, is Donald Trump really in charge of all this? Or is he simply riding the sleigh that?
That's super interesting question. I mean, I was just listening to a podcast. It's the Daily Beast podcast, and I think it's called Inside Trump's Head. And they had a psychiatrist who actually talks about this a lot. He's diagnosed Trump with malignant narcissism and everything that goes along with that, and that now he's actually losing it. And he's got at least early stage dementia, and he's probably had a stroke. So I think more and more, and if you notice his speech patterns and things, he's a bit more garbled. He goes off on these riffs. When he was at Quantico, he went off on this riff about, he gave a speech to the Marines, the Marine cadets, I think, and went off on how, when he signs papers, for the general's commissions, he wants it to be nice paper. He wants it to be the A paper, not the D paper. Put some more gold on it. And I want the gold ink, and I want my signature. Why use an auto pen? That's disrespectful. And he went on like this. This is not normal if you're president of the United States. And he does this a lot. So unfortunately, I think a person really important behind the throne is Stephen Miller, who's scary. And I also think Russell Vogt, who's trying to gut the bureaucracy. And I think that guy, he's so smarmy, Scott Bessent. Oh. So I think these are the people that are actually kind of running things now, right? The cabinet are all a bunch of, yes, sir, you're fabulous, yes, people. And another grounds for hope is that a lot of these people are incompetent and not qualified for their jobs, including the Secretary of War, Mr. Lethality, not competent. And if we get attacked, I'm afraid, honestly. I've listened to somebody else who said the military is not going to protect us. Their ethos of professionalism, they will obey orders if they regard them as legal. So if they're given what they regard as a legal order, and even if it's an illegal order, if it's an unlawful order, this was a person who studies this, and she said, they're still going to do it. So we're not going to get a military coup, right? We're not going to get the military to remove Trump. It has to be the people, right? It has to be either Article 25, good luck with that, or we vote all these people out and make sure we have our voting rights. Rant rave. Yes.
That feel like we do. It's really important for us to not underestimate the amount of fear that people who have lost their jobs in industrial manufacturing and in coal mining and parts of America that have suffered economic decimation. It's really important not to underestimate the fear they have and the reasonable attachment they have to the hope and change that Trump offered them. It's also important not to underestimate or overestimate incompetence on the part of those who are behind the scenes in the Trump administration. Russell Vogt is extremely competent at what he's doing. He is not qualified or truly constitutionally authorized to do what he's doing, but he's really good at doing it. And we should not think he's an incompetent man.
No,
His
okay.
paper is being wielded with extreme efficiency.
Yeah, I will agree with that. Okay, he is competent at what he's doing.
Yes, that's
However, but he's competent at ripping down the institutions, and it's illegal. So somehow he needs to be held accountable. But some of these other people,
Oh, yeah.
oh geez, I mean,
But
heck,
to recognize that some people have been incredibly diligent for a long time
Mhm.
and focused, and they have gone in, well, it's just like the east wing coming down in 4 days. Without waiting for the proper permits or whatever.
Right, the East Wing.
They have learned how to do it, and we need to recognize that and take it seriously.
Oh, I agree. I agree 100%. It's not like the thing is going to fall apart from incompetence. I mean, I think some of the government services are going to start falling apart, because they've been hollowed out, and people who actually know how to do things are going to. But see, what that does, I think, is it makes it harder for Trump to fulfill his promises to just ordinary workers who are suffering and still are suffering from, it's called deindustrialization, right? And this is why he wanted to kind of reindustrialize, but I'm not sure what's happening with that. People who are economists may have a better idea.
One last question.
Okay.
Most people have some part of their life in the cyberspace.
Mm.
Some people have like almost their whole life.
All of it.
And it's, engineered to be entertaining. Real life isn't. It's
Right.
just accidentally entertaining occasionally. And I'm wondering how that affects democracy and the goals that we're hoping to
Yeah.
move forward.
I think badly. I mean, I think it can be. If you remember when these things were getting off the ground, sort of in the early 2000s, like 2005, 6, social media was starting to get going, and it was touted as a democratizing force, where because it was not a broadcast, it was anybody can get on and be a content creator and say their piece and join communities of like-minded people. Gee, wouldn't that be great for civil society? Well, what's happened is because of, zero regulation of it, there's so many people that have gone down into these rabbit holes and underground, I don't know what they are, the dark web, and I don't know, you know more about this than I do, and into the world of video games, or that's like more real than reality. And this is something that is a real problem. I didn't even talk about that. This could be a whole other set of lectures by somebody who knows more about this than I do. But I think that it's bad because what's happened is there's a bunch of groups that are anti-democrat, and they have a huge voice on the internet. And the way that the algorithms work, if you subscribe to that, you're going to get more of it, and you're not going to hear the other points of view, right? They're included. I mean, you have to go look at them, look for them. And the really bad thing is a lot of young people, a lot of students get most of their news from social media, from their friends. They can't get off their phones. The last class I taught, I have a thing in my syllabus. If I see you looking at your phone, you get a 0 for participation. And that means the highest thing you can get in the class is a B-. They're still, so it's bad. It's really bad. And so what I think about the No Kings, and I know you guys have to go, is I think young people are seeing. I know they disrespect baby boomers and a lot of us who have, we look like this and we're out there protesting, but I think it attracts attention and they see what's going on here. And I remember I went to my first protest this year and we were coming away from it and we had a sign that said, down with Project 2025. And this young woman was driving up and she said, what's Project 2025? We said, look it up. Look it up. It's the way they're going to take over. And she goes, what? And never heard of it. So, yeah, no, it's a good sign.
Very much.
Thanks for your attention. Appreciate it.